Welcome to Feel Good Friday, our weekly segment where we dive into the weird and wild news of the world of health. This week, songs for the deaf. Your voice is a mask. R.I.P. to medical debt. Psilocybin therapy is here. And Elden Ring telekinesis. Woo! Let's go. I love it. I love it. It's Friday. The weekend's here.
It's time.
It's time.
You know, and we're going to be listening to Rich O'Coin this weekend.
That's right. We just heard him right there lead us into this episode, and he's going to be playing a show in Halifax on Saturday. And
get your tickets if you haven't already.
Yeah, sure. Come to the show, and if you see us, for sure, maybe if you want, say hi.
But not for too long.
But leave it at that.
You know, we might be weird.
Don't get too close to me because I'm a bit sweaty.
I know there's someone listening to this right now, and I have a story that's very fun to tell, but also when I tell the story, the reactions that people give is really extreme. And I won't tell it on here because I don't want this person that's listening right now, and you know exactly who you are.
Let's just bleep their name.
No, I
just like last week when we did that, you know, and it worked really well.
But it has to do with like someone meeting someone who listens to the podcast at a Rich show, and it's really funny. It's like that's a really
story.
We can talk about it after, but we don't have time for that. We got to get into what we have today because Brian has to go to therapy, so we got to get through this.
It's therapy day here at Sick Boy HQ.
I had my therapy this morning. It was great.
Oh. Okay.
Taylor's probably going biking later.
Let's to kick things off to
maybe
make
a run
to make things feel good. I've got a video that is most certainly the feel good variety. So take a look at this. This little girl just heard her voice for the very first time.
Wow, what a trip.
So she's in what I gather is she's in like an ENT clinic. She gets a set of like hearing aids implanted. Maybe there's like some sort of internal surgical kind of process going on there. And they turn these things on, and she hears her voice for the very first time, and her reaction is just like bewilderment. It's like, whoa, fuck.
Are you hearing this?
Yeah, you hear that? Like that came out of me, you know? And so I've been thinking about this quite a bit recently. It came up in conversation a couple times, but I had recently watched this TED Talk that Kira sent me, and it was fascinating. It's basically this researcher who has like dedicated her life to studying the voice and
like the show.
Yes, the show, the ins and outs of the voice, like how to get on the show, how to win the show.
What the judges are really looking for in the performance.
So she gives this some, her name is Rebecca Kleinberger. She gives this fascinating TED Talk on the voice. And one of the elements that she gets into is why it feels weird for us to hear our own voices when it's not us just speaking. Like when we hear recordings of our voice, the reasons why.
Right, like when you're listening to your voice in headphones or hearing it played back for you.
When were we just talking about this?
We were. And we were talking with a guest, and it kind of came up, I think, pre-recording, and I said, we were actually going to cover this on Feel Good Friday.
Right.
So we're here. So there's... before I get into her sort of breakdown about the inner voice that we have, I just want to play a little clip from her TED Talk. She's a fascinating woman, pretty thick French accent. But just check this out. This
resulted from a head trauma?
Yeah, that's right. Foreign accent syndrome.
She's actually Australian.
Her name is Rebecca Kleinberger, and if you want to look up her TED Talk, I highly suggest it.
And by listening to the voice, we can understand possible failures of what happens inside. For example, listening to very specific type of turbulences and non-linearity of the voice can help predict very early stages of Parkinson, just through a phone call. Listening to the breathiness of the voice can help detect heart disease. And we also know that the changes of tempo inside individual words is a very good marker of depression.
Whoa.
Just wait
Your
for
voice
it.
is also very linked with your hormone levels. Third parties listening to female voices were able to very accurately place the speaker on their menstrual cycle, just with acoustic informations. And now with technologies listening to us all the time, Alexa from Amazon Echo might be able to predict if you're pregnant even before you know it.
What?
So think about the ethical application of that.
Guys,
Pretty trippy, right?
I mean, the first thing that jumps out at me is like the privacy concerns around all of that. Like
Sure.
just the fact that like with technologies like that and the increased capabilities,
Yeah.
is that like, I mean, there's going to be almost no privacy around that. If something can hear you and predict those things, like whether you're depressed, whether you're pregnant,
Yep.
like that sounds scary.
Yeah. I mean, in a dystopian kind of way, is a lot of room for manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Which
It's impressive,
which is kind of interesting.
but it's like also mildly concerning.
But there's also other aspects of that which are like utilizing this sort of ability or this technology to get ahead of things like depression or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or what have you. So needless to say, that's not where I wanted to go with this. I just wanted to show you a little snippet of this woman's TED Talk because it's just chock full of that kind of shit. Fascinating stuff. But she ends up getting into this idea of the sound of our voice, our inner voice, our outer voice, and how we sort of relate to our voice, which I just think is really, really interesting. So here's sort of like a distilled kind of breakdown of what she gets into. So why is it that the inner voice remains a mystery to us? Why does it often elude our conscious awareness? Let's delve into the intricacies of this internal dialogue. Picture this. When you wear a mask, it's not the mask itself that captures your attention. Instead, your focus is drawn to what lies within, which is the realm of your inner voice. So to comprehend the distinction, let's explore how the mechanisms of perception shapes this inward voice.
Wait, I don't really get that analogy. So
Yeah,
like
so-
if you're wearing a mask, then and you can't see the person's face, then you have to focus more on like
Their voice is
personality?
making up the lion's share of information that you are
specifically.
getting
So it's
from
not
that
an
person.
analogy. It's
not-
like
not quite.
specifically
No,
talking about the voice.
No, it is an analogy. So
Yeah.
so you relate to your voice the way that you relate to a mask. If you take a mask and you put a mask on, and let's say you never looked at the front of the mask, you have no idea what this mask looks like at all. You are just familiar with the inside of this mask and what you're seeing. If you took the mask off and you turned it around, that is the side of the mask that everybody on the outward sees, derives information from, is familiar with, but you are so unfamiliar with it because you don't see the mask.
Right.
Same with your voice. The outside voice, the outward voice is what everybody else hears and perceives and takes in. Your inside voice is only what you can perceive because you actually have zero capability of hearing your outward voice.
To that point, guys, think about how crazy it was before there were mirrors. Like people just really didn't know what the fuck they looked like.
Well, there's water.
I know,
You
but like
do have
that's not.
reflections,
But
yeah, for sure.
even so, that's not a
Not in-
great representation.
Not in
of-
detail,
I mean,
but it's similar to watching TV from the 90s to watching TV today.
I'd say even worse. Like
Yeah.
I'd say the TV from like the 50s.
Well, there's
Color in reflections, so
Yeah.
it's better
yeah,
than the 50s.
but you do have a point there, Bri, in that like when Westerners sort of intervene in tribes that have been uncontacted for centuries, and they show, say, like a reflection of a mirror or a photo, there's the reaction to that type of thing is like, oh my, holy fuck, there's some sort of magic here. There's some sort of, like, you've captured my soul.
Right,
Which is very different from,
not because they're unfamiliar with a reflection of themselves, but because
the clarity of it is so fucking
the
mind-blowing.
clarity
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
reflection is not residing in the water that they're familiar with, but it's on this panel,
Yes.
this magic panel that now you're showing me.
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, but think about it, even if you could look in the water and see your reflection, I mean, you have to have like a flat body of water that you can go to and look into that and
Yeah,
see
yeah.
it. And so like think
It's not accessible.
Think of the difference in like how often we look at ourselves today now with mirrors and
It's
things
like dozens
like
of times a day, maybe.
how much that sort of changes the way that you sort of think of yourself too.
Depends on who you are. There's some people at the gym. It's so funny going to the gym and watching like the way that
It is weird.
The gym is just a big mirror. And so like seeing the way that people relate to seeing themselves in the mirror. I mean, we know this from like teaching yoga in studios that have mirrors, but like, it's so fascinating to watch people's relationship to looking at themselves.
It's funny because mirrors in a lot of ways like bring out this sort of, I don't want to say that they're bad or that they're negative, but like it does.
They amplify. I think they're neutral to positivity, and they're pretty amplifying. They amplify negativity.
Yeah.
Oftentimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting, Jared, like being in the gym and watching people like sort of give off a little pose.
Yeah. Especially the fucking like kids that come in there with their like permed haircuts and.
But with your voice, it's very interesting because you do have this. I was about to say most people, but I'm sure there's a gigantic swath of people who like have never recorded their voice or heard their voice heard back to them, or at least not often. But I think many people are familiar with the rare occasion where they do get to hear their voice played back to them, and a lot of people have a very visceral reaction to that.
Well, so here's the thing. We forget that because
we do it
as we
every day.
speak right now, there are monitors in our ears where like I'm hearing myself speak right now. So we've gotten used to it by virtue of our job. But I almost guarantee you the first time you ever heard your voice, you would have had a reaction just like that.
Yeah. I can still remember it. I mean, it was still very fresh when we started doing this, even though up until that point, I'd probably heard it 100 times.
So here's the body employs a ton of different filters, which process the inner voice differently from the outward voice.
Like Snapchat.
Kind of, yeah. As the inner voice embarks on its journey, so your inward voice, it first traverses through your bones, a phenomenon known as bone conduction. So like there's new headphones you can get these days that use bone conduction. You don't even put them in your ears, you wear them on your temple, and you can hear the sound through your temple bones, through the bones.
Guys, the world is crazy.
So unlike the outward voice, which travels through the air, this inward counterpart resonates at a lower register, imbued with a more harmonious musicality. So when you hear your voice outside, when you hear the outward source of your voice, typically it sounds
worse.
It sounds high pitch.
Yeah.
It sounds tinny. And you're like, I sound like such a beta cuck. You know, you have this thought of like, that's my wimpy little voice.
Yeah.
I thought I sounded like a booming man, a scary booming man.
It is so interesting.
But really, I sound like Ira Glass.
What's really funny?
What's wrong with Ira Glass?
Nothing's wrong with Ira Glass.
What's really funny is that
Who wants to sound like Ira Glass?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very
I
unique
want to
to
sound
him.
like John Cena.
Guys,
it's funny because
I
when
take
you
offense to that because on the spectrum of one of us that are more closely sounding like Ira
you're
Glass,
closest
I
to-
know that I'm closest.
you're closest to Ira Glass. But it's interesting. It's interesting in the way that because I hear my voice in this context all the time, and then shameless plug, where we produced a new series. It's called New Wave. You can look it up and find it now. It's really interesting. But I host that series and I speak differently in that. Like I'm speaking in a much more focused way.
Performative.
It's a more performative way of speaking. And when I record, because I might record one episode and record my voice for that episode on different days, like pieces of it on different days.
Yeah.
And I don't think an audience member is probably paying much attention or noticing that there's a change in the voice, but you can pick up these like subtle changes in your voice.
I mean,
especially when it's coming from the outside.
If you right now pause this episode of Feel Good Friday and you went back to the very first Feel Good Friday episode and listened to our voices, you'll be able to tell it's us, but it sounds very different.
When we do speaking engagements and we play clips from like the first year or two of the podcast, our voices are so different.
Yeah. Puberty. So that's the sound reaching you, right? Now, upon reaching the ears, the inner voice encounters another layer of filtration. A mechanical partition shields the inner ear during vocalization, diminishing what reaches your auditory senses.
No.
Adding to this complexity is a biological filter within the cochlea, where living cells respond differently based on their familiarity with the sound, leading to a habituation effect. Okay? But the journey doesn't end there. There's a neurological filter, and this is what I was talking about in the conversation that we had before this in a previous conversation.
Your brain's doing EQ.
Remarkably, your brain's adding basically like a full-on noise gate. So remarkably, neurologists have discovered that when you produce a sound with your voice, your own auditory cortex temporarily shuts down. So while you hear your voice, your brain actively does not process that sound.
So that you don't listen to yourself?
Yes, it's a phenomenon termed corollary discharge. Evolutionarily, this makes sense. Our brains, aware of the expected sound, conserve energy by not scrutinizing the familiar signal.
Do you think do you think that we have developed over time the ability to turn off ourselves talking even with monitors in as like podcast hosts? So like listening to it, the way that our brain does that you just described, like that noise gate that cuts out your voice when you're talking. Do you think that over time of hearing yourself in your ears while recording a podcast, that it develops the ability to cancel out that as well? Because I don't really think of myself hearing my voice when I'm talking right now in the same way that I did, in the beginning of doing the show.
I wonder if there's a correlation between something like self-consciousness or anxiety and the brain's ability to stop, to turn that part of the brain off. Like if your brain was less capable, maybe somewhere on a spectrum, to be able to shut that part of the brain off while you're speaking, then I would imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm interpreting what this function of the brain is doing, but I'm hearing it as if you don't turn that off, or if it didn't turn off or didn't turn off as well, then you would be more analytical of everything that you're saying, because you are listening to what you're saying rather than just allowing yourself to say it.
But do you even have the ability to do that? That's the question, right? Like, do you even have you have the ability to cognitively think and process that, but do you actually have the capability of not turning off that part of your brain? Right. So like the corollary discharge isn't just something that happens with our voice, right? It serves as a copy of a motor command sent by the brain, informing other brain regions about an impending motion. So this is even like hand movement. It's like when you pick up a pen and you fiddle with a pencil.
So like if you're talking like this, you're not.
There's not a single element of your brain that is thinking about the process of what you're doing with your hand. Mm-hmm. It's the same with your voice. It's the same thing. It's like me manipulating this and like spinning it around. Mm-hmm. There's no thought to these movements. It's like my hands have their own movement, their own sort of like autonomous existence.
You've like compartmentalized that function so that you can actually perform multiple functions at the same time.
Exactly.
I think to me though, like Taylor, to your point,
which is just trippy to think. It's just like, what are the implications of that? What does that mean? What does that mean for different?
Well, I mean, it's not like, for me, it's not thinking actively about what I'm saying that then like causes me to sort of critique or judge myself and then become anxious about that. It's more this other voice that exists at the same time in my head that is like my inner monologue, that is all the things that I'm not saying at that moment that I'm listening to, that would then lead me to feel anxious. Like the actual words coming out of my mouth aren't the things that I'm worried about. It's like that like inner critic that's like, well, why the fuck did
right? But that inner critic is louder when you're paying more or can be, I guess, more louder when you're paying more attention to what that is.
So one of the things she starts to kind of speak about this in the talk, and basically in the context of the voice, this corollary discharge assumes a distinct identity, which is the inner voice. So to summarize, we have a mask representing the outward voice, the inner workings of the mask symbolizing the inward voice, and then finally the inner voice itself, the puppeteer orchestrating the entire system. Think of the inner voice as the constant companion in your silent readings, the persistent narrator during important conversations, and the melody that lingers stubbornly in your mind. It's the voice that refuses to be silenced, often persisting even when unwanted. For some, controlling this inner voice is a challenge, as seen with individuals with conditions such as schizophrenia, where distinguishing between internal and external voices becomes blurred. It's the voice that dictates your dreams. It's the voice that sings the fucking Creed song that you just can't get out of your head. It's this like, it is almost its own, again, it's like, it's the hands. It's like this autonomous thing that you really only exert a certain amount of control over, which is fucking like, it's just a trippy thing to think about.
I feel like
I love it.
I really identify with the inner voice because I feel like that is my thought of like what ADHD is to me.
Totally.
It's this like fast paced, fast moving, fast thinking inner voice that's happening in my head of like, do this thing, think about that thing. You got to like solve this problem, think about that problem, do these things. Like, oh, you forgot that you had to do that thing. Don't do that thing before you do this thing. It's just like constantly going and also very loud. And to me, that is what my experience of ADHD is like the volume turned way up. And that one day that I took like a small dosage of Adderall, I felt, and like whether it was placebo or not or whatever it was, like I felt the volume of that voice turn down for a bit.
Which is really like, I mean, again, this whole thing started as a sort of investigation into why it's so weird for us to hear our voice. And it led me to this place of like, whoa, fuck. How fascinating that I've never really thought about my inward voice as this thing that seems to have like quite a distinct effect on my day-to-day life. And I'm starting to recognize that this voice, this inward voice, is almost like somehow separate from me or what I am, which is like, I think when you start to go to therapy and you start to unpack the way that you view the world and the way that you think about things or the challenges that arise in your life, you start to make very similar sort of connections to that, which you go, wow, fuck, like, there's a difference. There's a part of me that understands these things that my therapist is telling me. But like I'm just starting to realize now that it's like, wow, I maybe I don't have there's a part of the way there's a way that I go about the world that I'm not even noticing how little control I have over it.
So
until you start to notice it,
to right? That point, and also to some degree to what you were saying about the volume of that voice. I think mostly to what you're saying there, Jared, is like, is it then a pursuit of unifying those two voices and making them as much as they can be one and the same?
Yeah. I mean, even to like, I know you said less to the degree of what I was saying, but I think that's totally like my feeling in like going to therapy or thinking about taking medication is that I like some aspects of the loud volume, fast pace of the inner voice, but I know that there's some things that are good about it that I need to turn down or dial back a little bit. But there's also some things that can benefit from this like quieter outer voice that's trying to like find some middle ground between the two. And I think for me, I like thinking of that as being the goal of finding that middle ground is probably a pretty healthy way for me to think about it. I don't know. Do you feel like going to therapy, Jared, do you feel like you're trying to unite that inner voice and outer voice, or are you trying to like silence the inner voice?
No, I think there's elements of trying to unite the two. You know, it's like, and again, it's just like another form of mindfulness. It's not just being mindful of your surroundings or mindful of your physical body. It's like being mindful of the way that you relate to that inner voice. That it's like, I almost sort of like, in order to conceptualize or make it sort of work in a framework that's easier to digest, it's like almost seeing it as a different you. It's like there's you and there's me, and then there's the inner me, which
yeah, I think
is detached somehow.
I think a lot of people, most people, relate to that. The reason I asked that question, and you guys will make a joke about me in this, I'm sure, but like I asked that question because I feel personally like those two things are very unified in me now, but I very much remember as like a teenager that they were not. Like very much so not. And probably not in the moment, because this was kind of my whole kind of like adolescent experience. I wasn't really aware of what that experience was until it was no more. And it was really only in hindsight that I recognized that, like as like a young adult. But I very much identify with that idea that there's two voices and they are very separate people. And I'm living living two lives in a way via those two voices and how I think and how I show up in the world.
Like Ted Bundy did.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel I sort of disagree with the idea, and not disagree. I feel like I try hard to recognize the fact that even though those two voices are very different, it's both me. You know, like I think that is, it's helpful for me to think of it that way, in the sense that the goal is unifying, as you sort of highlighted. And so if I think of them as two separate people, it feels harder to bring them together.
Right.
If I think of them as both me and different strengths and different situations, then it feels easier to find that.
What do you think of the possibility, though, that they're both not you?
It's high.
What if the inner voice is not you at all?
And we're just and somebody is controlling me via remote viewing. Dude, I've been
maybe
I've been getting a lot of remote viewing TikToks.
I mean, I think if you just go back to like, we talked about this recently, I can't remember where, but like, I mean, we've talked about this several times, is like, like classic and sort of base level yoga and Hindu philosophy is like you have a self that's like pure, and like over time, and as you build social connections and social structures, they like layer things on top of you that sort of gradually obscure, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways, the like you-ness. And then and where mindfulness comes into play is that like if mindfulness is not something that is built into you naturally, or it's not something that you practice, which is like 99% of everybody, then we run the risk of becoming not you. Like you run the risk of becoming not you.
Well, there's so many different ways to there's like becoming the Buddha and Buddhist philosophy. They're like coming like to a more modern scientific approach in psychology. It's about emotional regulation. It's like when you're emotionally dysregulated, you do things that might be not aligned with the way that you really want to present or carry yourself through the world. So like, emotional regulation is probably the first step in like getting to that place where you're able to make those decisions that are more aligned with like who you are as a person. I think like for me, that's the benefits that I've seen in therapy, is like understanding when I'm reacting to a situation emotionally, and being able to identify that and manage that response, not in real time, but in a way that I don't go and take that a negative experience and like dwell on it for days.
Which is an example of you taking back the control of you from the you that's not you, that's controlling you.
Yeah.
And so there is a way where we can tie this to aliens, and here's how. That's how they're controlling us. They want they feed off our negativity, and they're trying to squash our consciousness. And there's a big pyramid buried under Alaska. That pyramid actually is suppressing our consciousness. And so anyway, whatever, we don't have to get into that.
Did you hear about the remote viewing? The soldiers that are being trained in Antarctica?
Oh my God. Have I ever?
Let's move on.
Because Jer's hook, line, and sinker.
No. The world's not ready for it, Bri. This is fascinating. Taylor, you put this in my orbit. RIP Medical Debt. This is an organization out of the U.S. That was founded in 2014 by two former debt collections executives. And over the course of decades in the debt buying industry,
They're repenting.
they they met with thousands of Americans saddled with unpaid and unpayable medical debt and realized that they were uniquely qualified to help those in need. They imagined a new way to relieve medical debt by using donations to buy large bundles of debt that is erased with no tax consequences to donors or recipients. And so from that idea, RIP Medical Debt was born. It's a New York-based 501c3, and the results have been pretty miraculous. Billions in medical debt has been eradicated so far. Just recently, a woman named Casey McIntyre, 38-year-old book publisher and mother of one, helped wipe out more than $30 million in unpaid medical bills for other people without even being alive to see it.
How does that work?
So so her husband, think of it almost like a Kickstarter account. This woman dies. Her husband posts a message on her behalf after she died of ovarian cancer, asking people to participate in a debt jubilee that pays off medical bills of others. The response has been overwhelming. As of Sunday, the nonprofit RIP Medical Debt has received more than $300,000 in donations through McIntyre's campaign. So through her version of
so they
RIP
get
Medical Debt.
like tax deductible receipts for making a donation, and the donation goes
the organization relieves $10,000 of medical debt for every $100 donated. Now, that was $300,000 last Sunday. Today, as I prep this, today they're at $609,802. Just McIntyre's campaign.
Yeah, so that will be 60 million.
So,
so there's something going on here where,
which I don't understand, debt buying or like that. There's
something here where basically, like, let's say you owe $1,000. Collections, like, so you've got a collections call in your life. You owe $200 to Rogers, and then you switch to Bell, and fucking you never pay Rogers, whatever. So somebody comes along and they buy your debt from Roger, your $200 debt.
Oh, I see.
For like $50 from Rogers, because Rogers just goes, let's just make 25% of our debt back. Now the debt collector now owns that debt. They paid $50 for it, and the debt collector tries to make $150 profit on their $50 purchase on your debt.
That's right, by breaking your knees.
Yes. So there's something in that, how that relationship works.
Yeah, right.
Where now the debt is someone bought the debt, and now the debt is actually, if you just nil from the person who bought it, like if you just equalized from the person who bought it, the debt is now worth much less. So the total debt is 60 million, but what it's actually going to cost to wipe it out is 600,000.
Yeah.
Which is fucking crazy just to begin with.
Yeah. So you make a donation, RIP buys medical debt at a steep discount in bundles, which means that the donation that you made relieves about 100x its value in medical debt.
Does that help the person who didn't pay their bills?
Well, it relieves them of the debt. Because now the debt collection. So once a debt collector buys your debt, then the person who owes the debt is still on the hook.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're just on the hook to the debt collector. Mm-hmm. But if the debt collector is working on your behalf to get you off the hook, and they buy your debt, now you're good.
Nearly
think of it like a
but your credit is still negatively affected because it went into collections and the debt wasn't paid for a certain amount of time.
Well, no, because it would have, but they get
ahead of it.
Yeah,
they ensure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So
instead of it going to collections,
it goes to RIP medical debt. Right.
They're like a collector.
Quasi-collector.
That's right.
They're just not collecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They're the non-collecting collector.
Right.
Nearly 7 in 10 U.S. adults say they receive medical bills that they cannot afford. Many are forced to delay paying the bill, put it on a credit card, or challenge the bill. 6 in 10 patients report they have self-treated, delayed, or skipped dental or medical appointments. 34% report changing the foods they eat or eating less food to afford healthcare. Nearly half feel trapped and believe they will never be able to pay off their debt, while a third of respondents reported feeling heightened depression and anxiety. I mean, the episode hasn't come out yet, but we talked about the intersections between money and mental health. And that episode's coming out soon with Jessica Morehouse. Really excited for that episode. Nearly 9 in 10 blame the healthcare industry for fueling the medical debt crisis, not patients themselves. and they say that the problem stems from a system putting profit over patients. So that's where RIP medical debt's coming in, which, I mean, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating little sort of loophole that these two people kind of started. And
I mean, like, theoretically, this is a crazy loophole. Theoretically, Americans as a whole could come together.
That's the thing.
And go, would
we
we all
Yeah.
like to pay
Yeah.
100 times less
Yeah.
for our medical care?
Yeah.
Because we can through this company.
That's right. Like if you had 50% of the population of America basically pay into this, a nominal amount, it might wipe medical debt across
Man, it's
the
like,
board. That's a wild thought.
It's like there would almost be a better system where like healthcare could virtually be free.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fucking crazy?
Yeah.
See, you know what? Now, I'm not saying that I want America to stay the way that it is, but I was really struck, and I think I mentioned this on one episode of the show already, maybe a few weeks ago, is when we spoke with Alex Dunphy again as part of our New Wave series.
Really plugging away, eh?
He mentioned something because he is the CEO of a company called Adaptive, and Adaptive creates these things called immobilizers and boluses that people use, that people have to have made for them when they do radiation treatment. And typically the way that is done, this is kind of like the Cole's notes of the episode. The way that that's done is that people come in, everything is high tech in the radiation therapy world. And then all of a sudden, when the patient comes in, is about to get this high tech treatment and this high tech machines and all this stuff, somebody comes in and does like arts and crafts time to make this thing that they have to wear on their face in order to get like the proper treatment. So it's like a mask that's
Like
being
a
made.
paper mache mesh mask.
And so what Adaptive does is they take that and they digitize it, and it's 3D. It's 3D printed, and the 3D printing is based on all the scans that you would have had received already as a part of like your general cancer treatment and preparation for treatment. So they make this anyway. Peter or Alex was saying that the role that the U.S. plays in getting new technology to the world, medical technology to the world, is like pivotal. And the only reason that it plays that pivotal role is because of the for-profit system that exists. So basically this, like, not that this is a reason to just like keep it the way that it is and keep the status quo, but that there is this like incredible silver lining, which comes at the expense of millions and millions of people, which is not okay. But the silver lining to that shitty situation is that the US is where new medical technology goes to thrive, so that the rest of the world can then benefit from it.
Do you think?
Which I just went, oh wow, that's an angle. Never thought of it.
I asked Alex about this after, and because I basically asked if the U.S. system all of a sudden became public, what would happen to innovation? Like these companies, what would happen to them? Where would they go? And he's like, well, they would just go to another country where that's a more favorable. Yeah. There's more favorable outcomes for them. I wonder how true that is, in the sense that, there's a lot of companies that choose to operate in North America. Not just, we just had a guy in here who really enjoys living in Halifax, and so that's part of it. And maybe it's more attractive to financially start your company in some other country in the world. But there's a lot of people who enjoy living in North America.
There's other ways to do everything.
Yeah.
And
I think that like, I understand the situation, I think, but I feel like there are more creative ways to maintain that sort of sense.
I'm sure there is. And I was just saying that as like
that incentive.
As like, it's very easy to like only shit on that system.
Totally.
And it, by all means, let's shit on it, because I think on the limit, I would rather see millions of people not be crippled by debt for their entire lives and marginally slow down medical innovation.
Hot take.
I have $30,000 in credit card debt. When they call, I tell them I can't pay it back yet. Credit card debt.
So let's move on before we wrap here. For this week's edition, of... This is wild. You guys familiar with Twitch?
Yes.
Familiar.
Yeah. So video gaming, very big on Twitch.
Former CEO. Is that where we're going?
No. No.
Former
Emmett
CEO,
Shears
no, I don't want to talk about
CEO of
CEOs.
OpenAI.
I want to talk
Until
about. I want to
Sam
talk
Altman's
about.
back.
Oh God.
Elden Ring.
You know,
I, wanna talk about
I was
Elden Ring.
gonna play Elden Ring until you discouraged me.
Yeah, I don't think you'd like it. It's too hard. Elden Ring, if you're not familiar, is a video game that is extraordinarily difficult, but it's hailed as one of the best video games of the last like decade. But the key part there is that it is extremely difficult. The game sort of encourages players to switch up the way that they play at every single junction of the game. There is a streamer, a very, very, very cute streamer, PerriKaryal, a streamer known for her unique challenges. She made headlines last month for attempting a groundbreaking feat, playing Elden Ring using just the power of her mind.
With no controllers or anything.
No controllers or anything at all.
This thing, remote viewing that we've been talking about, she basically remote viewed into the game itself.
Basically.
And controlled it.
Yeah, so this ambitious endeavor was born from Perry's desire to undertake the most challenging task she could imagine. Her journey began in the Minecraft world, another video game that's not nearly as hard as Elden Ring, where the idea first germinated, and eventually transitioned to the daunting boss arenas of Elden Ring's The Lands Between.
I don't know, killing the Ender Dragon is pretty difficult.
When clips of Perry's Twitch stream went viral, the community found the community around From Software's games, known for finding innovative ways to play, played a pivotal role in motivating her to push the boundaries of what her mind control technology could achieve. Perry's academic background is in psychology. She holds a master's degree, providing the foundation for her experimentation with hardware. The consumer-grade EEG machine that she uses cost her about £1,000, which was purchased with profits from her stream. So she uses an EEG headset,
consumer grade,
£1,000, programs it in order to play Elden Ring, and does it successfully. Here's a video of her
that is
basically showing off what she's capable of.
I've gotten a lot of stuff online being like, oh no, that's cap, oh, are you for real, etc. So as a final demonstration, no controller.
On God.
On God.
Well, we need a little bit more. We need a wider view here to.
There's multiple documentaries online that show exactly the process that she uses. Like this isn't like a.
There's a guy sitting off camera with a controller.
Now watch her use it. It's really fun to watch her like.
Heal. Attack. And again.
What's the lag time? I mean, it must be.
It's milliseconds.
You can tell.
But
Heal.
So I'll go into it a little bit more. But
so those are not voice commands.
So that's
Every time
crazy
she
that
wants
she
to
even
attack,
did
she
that.
has to
But
think the right thought
the
to
fascinating
push that
part
brain
is
activity
that
through the EEG, which has a keybind to her attack.
Her ability to do certain things involve intensive training for the EEG machine to identify the brain activity patterns corresponding with the desired action. So for her to attack like that, it has nothing to do with her saying the word attack. She literally has trained the EEG machine to basically press like the F key on her keyboard whenever she has the thought of moving a heavy object forward.
Although her saying attack is reinforcing.
Her saying attack is just like
reinforcing the brain pattern.
Sure, I mean the way she put it was like I was just basically using the word to like say to
actively think about it.
Not even to actively tell the person that's watching. This is what here's the process I'm going through. Attack. I'm going to start thinking about the thing. Okay, there it is. And then heal. I'm going to think about whatever it is that she thought about to heal, like drinking a glass of water or something. The thing is still a work in progress. While attacking is successfully mapped to her mental movements, other actions like movement and item usage sometimes remain tethered to traditional controller. Perry acknowledges the occasional unreliability of the system, necessitating continuous fine-tuning. Despite the challenges, Perry's experimentation has garnered significant attention. But beyond gaming, Perry sees this potential of EEG technology in various applications, particularly in enhancing accessibility for individuals with disabilities.
Yeah.
Her use of the EEG headset is not just about content creation, it's a means to raise awareness about the capabilities of brain-related technologies and destigmatize discussions around mental health.
I want to buy one of those and start playing around with that. We should build something here to.
Man, it would be incredible if you could. I mean, just again, that would be, because it is already, from the accessibility thing. That's one thing. But just in its broadest sense, it's already fascinating that you are doing that in your mind while you're looking at a screen, and your fingers are translating those thoughts.
Oh, totally.
Via button combinations.
I mean,
like, that's already crazy.
It becomes super fascinating when you sit down, like when I, as an avid gamer, 35 years of life, video gaming basically for 30 of those years, and I sit down with Kira, who has next to no history of gaming,
looking at the controller all the time,
and watching her try to process the ability to move a character in 3D space.
I want to do this
and
thing.
Turn their head. And
how do I do that?
It's like her trying to learn Russian.
It probably looks like a full body experience too. There's probably
100%.
like a lot of movement happening. Yeah. Whereas like with us, it's just like controller in your hand, sitting in a comfortable position. It's all happening at your.
It's literally no different than breathing.
You know, it's wild.
Just this. I mean, it goes back to the voice thing, the hand thing. It's like you don't think about it. It's your brain has turned off that part that is anticipating or thinking about the action. Your brain turns it off because you don't actually need to put.
It's really,
but to be able to turn that into like just sitting there and going,
"Fuck yeah!" Dude.
You know what's crazy though
that's crazy.
It is interesting though to understand that video game literacy, like the underlying sort of thoughts that go into making a controller move, in the sense that like I recently switched from using a controller to mouse and keyboard.
Yes.
And even like being video game literate and switching over, and like sometimes I download like a new first person shooter, and even though the controls might be slightly different, you can just like blindly press a key assuming it might do something, and 9 times out of 10 it does.
Yeah.
It's so wild to like think about how your brain tracks that.
That boils down to like the science behind like user interface and
totally,
video games, right? So it's like
it's good design.
If you ever took a video game and you put it into someone's life and they picked up the controller, but you switch the button mapping around, so like, you know, the action button is actually clicking in the right stick, and the secondary action button is like pressing down on the D-pad.
Ew.
I mean, yeah, you like the person, any avid gamer would be like, what the fuck is this? I have no idea how to do anything in this thing, and none of this makes any sense. Well, because there's a science behind the like, whether it's natural or like an innate sort of instinctual where these things should be, or it's like we've become so accustomed to certain actions being tied to certain buttons or certain placements on a controller or on a surface for your hands.
You know what's interesting though? In a sense, it does inhibit innovation too, because people are so set in the way that they do things that they aren't willing to experiment with new design. So, for example,
so
I went in a
disability controller or something, like a controller, like an accessibility controller for PlayStation. It's like they had to rewrite the whole fucking script.
Well, so this was really interesting. I went into a deep dive of keyboards. So when I was buying my keyboard for my PC setup, I went like in a deep dive on different types of keyboards and styles. And there's like there are designers who have made like minimalist design style keyboards that have like only 2 or 3 rows that are mapped to different commands. So you have to like learn different. I love the sound of that. Like learn different sort of hotkeys to like switch between different character mapping and stuff. But one of the coolest designs that I saw is this thing called the Pararecorder, which they equate to like strumming chords like you do on a guitar, and each chord maps to a different sort of combination of letters that will spell out a word. So you can like essentially turn that
Are you
off
getting
now.
a boner? The fuck?
So what you can do with the camcorder is really interesting because you can just basically like sort of like play the piano to spell words, and it's incredibly fast at typing because the chords map to like full words rather than individual keys, and but nobody will adopt that new design. It's like there's way too much of a learning
I've seen
curve.
this. This is that fucking actually
like-
Lex Friedman has one like right on his desk.
Oh,
It's like,
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
this weird sort of like two boobs with buttons on them.
I thought that it was just
He
an
just
odd
has,
shaped
I think
keyboard.
he just has a keyboard that looks sort of similar.
Okay.
But the camcorder, you're like playing combinations.
I mean, I
of
feel like a
keys.
camcorder is sort of what maybe this is different, but like what courtroom stenographers use. Like it's sort of a similar sort of thing where it's like,
Are they not using typewriters?
no, they're using like they
like traditional
Or
typewriters.
not typewriters, but you know,
no,
whatever.
they
Keyboard,
like
regular keyboards,
they
QWERTY
basically
keyboards.
write in shorthand. So like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and the keyboard setup's all different, and it's like it's a complete
like
art.
like codes for full, like short codes for full words or something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that.
that makes a lot of sense.
Macros.
It's so interesting when
Did
you
a lot of macros.
It made me think of like what you were saying earlier, Jared, about when you like how interesting it is for the first, probably just like the first day that you start playing a new game,
Yeah,
or if you're switching between games.
or switching between genres.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
you're like, or if you've played a type of game where you've been
Yeah.
solely playing one game for whatever, like maybe 2 months, and then you switch to a new game and it's just like a different combat layout or whatever, and like you feel the latency in your fingers.
Yeah,
You feel the delay in your brain telling your finger what to do right,
But
and then like,
most-
the next day it's gone and it's
now
good.
imagine
But-
just doing that with your brain, being like, I know exactly.
But
what
most
to do.
games have like really good design in the sense that like the tutorials or the training sort of initial design of the game is
Totally.
meant to like ease you into the complexities of I assume I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, but I assume that like you're not starting out with a full arsenal of like different types of attacks and stuff. You
Oh yeah, you build it up.
Yeah, you
And-
build.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I just
then-
started new God of War like a couple days ago, and like it's really good. I mean, it's almost frustrating because I know the game well, so it's frustrating. But if I was starting new, I'd very much appreciate everything that it like tells you.
Yeah, so exciting times ahead. And again, this kind of ties back to conversations we've had multiple times on the show, but like things that bring benefit to accessibility in the world for people who need those things to have quality of life, oftentimes
better for everyone.
trickle down into ways that affect everybody else, and it just makes life fucking cooler.
Accessible design is good design, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's it for this week, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Brian's got to get off the therapy. We don't want this boy to break, so we got to make sure he gets out on time and gets all of his emotions out. If you want to support the show, you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We just got a recent review. It was a scathing review. Love to see it. Love to hear it. Apparently, we are smug as fuck. So if you
And
think we're
annoying.
smug,
Let us know.
and also let us know. Like, get specific.
Yeah,
Who's the smug one? And if you want to support further, join us on Discord. Lots of fun conversations and questions being proposed there. Our lovely Annika, the harmonica production assistant, is on there. Just lighting sparks. I love to see it. Love to see all the engagement. So come on over to the Discord. You can find the link in the show notes of this episode.
I love chatting on Discord.
And if you are thinking, yeah, they are smug, and you'd like to experience that smugness firsthand with us live, go over to our website, sickboypodcast.com, and you can fill out the guest form if you'd like to be a guest on the show. Smugness and all right there for you.
Thanks as always to the folks who helped make this show possible. Annika the harmonica, our production assistant. You're amazing. Jeff Lonis, Richard Coyne, Donovan Morgan. We love you guys.
That is it for this week.
I'm Brian.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jeremy, and this is Sick Boy.
And we say, nah.